On the afternoon of March 18, 1997, a road rage incident that escalates into a shooting leaves a black, off-duty LAPD police officer dead at the hands of a white undercover narcotics detective. Robbery homicide detective Fred Miller and his junior partner, Detective Russell Poole, get the case, and it will have serious ramifications for years to come, from a civil rights lawsuit to conspiracy theories involving the murder of Biggie Smalls in LA just 10 days earlier. This is the most complete telling of the Officer Kevin Gaines shooting and the investigation that followed. At approximately 4:05 p.m. on March 18, 1997, narcotics detective Frank Liga is driving away from an undercover operation outside a restaurant that used to be at this location, dressed in civilian clothing and driving a white Buick Regal. He had been working with other undercover detectives running a narcotics surveillance in what's referred to as a control buy. The plan was for their informant to meet with a woman going by the name Cindy at a Thai restaurant on Ventura Boulevard in Studio City. Cindy was going to give them a free sample of narcotics, and then the undercover detectives would follow Cindy to find out where she lived or where she went next. Liga was the point man on the case. But after waiting an hour for the woman to arrive, detectives call off the operation at 4 p.m. when she fails to show up. And Liga is now on his way from that location to the LAPD's Hollywood station 5 minutes later when he encounters Kevin Gaines. Liga has driven less than a mile from his surveillance operation when the incident with Gaines unfolds. Kevin Gaines is an off-duty LAPD patrol officer and is dressed in civilian clothes, a tracksuit, and driving a Mitsubishi Montero SUV. So they're both cops, but neither of them recognizes that the other guy is law enforcement because they're both dressed in plain clothes and driving civilian vehicles. According to Frank Liga, this is what unfolds next. Detective Liga stopped for the red tri-light signal at the intersection of Ventura Boulevard and Lancashire when a dark green Mitsubishi Montero drove up next to him. Liga's attention was drawn to the vehicle next to him when he heard a muffled voice emanating from it. Liga looked over to the vehicle and made eye contact with the driver. The right passenger window was rolled all the way down and the driver was speaking. Liga rolled his window down and asked the driver if there was a problem. The driver responded by yelling obscenities at him. The driver challenged Liga to a fight and threatened to cap on him. The driver told Liga to pull over to the curb, and Liga agreed and pulled to the curb, and the suspect followed doing the same. As the suspect pulled to the curb, Liga drove off in an effort to get away from him. Liga immediately communicated to other detectives, the guys he had just been with, that he needed assistance via his police radio under the dash of his car. One of Liga's fellow narcotics detectives from the operation that he's just left concurs with this account, stating that Liga said over the police radio, "Hey, I got this guy in a green truck who's acting like a fool." And a few seconds later, "I think he's got a gun." The detective said he could hear a loud voice in the background of Liga's radio call. Another detective reports that Liga said, "I think somebody is following me. I need you guys up here." And Liga's voice sounds excited. A police officer in the area also reports hearing a loud voice in the background of Liga's radio calls, talking fast, but was unable to distinguish what was being said. So ostensibly, they can hear Gaines in the background of Liga's radio calls, but they can't understand what he's saying. Another officer in the area hears Liga say, "Hey guys, get up here, I need you guys now, some guy is on my ass," and that Liga definitely had an urgency to his voice. One of the other narcotics detectives then puts out his own call over the radio saying, "Heads up, I think Frank's got a problem." Liga continued in his statement that he looked in his rearview mirror and observed that the suspect was unable to immediately drive from the curb due to oncoming traffic. However, seconds later, the suspect aggressively was able to weave his way out of traffic. Liga at this time believed the suspect was pursuing him due to his erratic driving as he approached. Liga again was attempting to communicate with other police detectives on a tactical frequency. Liga stopped for the red tri-light signal at Cahuenga Boulevard south of Regal Place. Liga then drew his 9mm pistol with his right hand and rested it on his lap in preparation to defend his life. In addition, he continued to broadcast over the police radio that he was going to have problems and needed assistance quickly. Gaines then pulled up next to Liga's vehicle again and appeared to be agitated and in an enraged state. Gaines yelled out at Liga, "I'll cap you, motherfucker." Simultaneously, Gaines extended his right arm and pointed a pistol at Detective Liga. In the belief he was about to be shot, Detective Liga raised his 9mm pistol and fired 2 rounds at Gaines. One of those rounds goes through Gaines's passenger door and into his right torso. A witness at the intersection hears the gunshots and sees Gaines's Montero SUV make a U-turn and then drive into the AM/PM parking lot nearby, followed by a white vehicle, which is the one Liga was driving. And the Montero stops abruptly near the AM/PM building. Over the police radio, Liga tells the other narcotics detectives he's got a gun, I just shot him, and then gives them his location. Liga gets out and discovers that Gaines is slumped and not moving in the front driver's seat. An officer in the area arrives and observes that Liga seems shaken, so the officer takes control of the scene and opens Gaines's driver's side door. The officer observes a Smith & Wesson semi-automatic handgun on the floorboard next to the driver's door. Gaines shows no signs of movement. Simultaneously, the narcotics detectives who had been with Liga just before the shooting also arrive, and they help pull Gaines out of the vehicle. And these detectives and other officers at the scene also witness discovering the gun in Gaines's vehicle. Liga requests an ambulance for Gaines, and he's taken to a hospital in nearby Burbank, where he is declared dead. The coroner later rules the cause of death was a single gunshot wound to the right side. No drugs or alcohol were in Gaines's system at the time. Incidentally, when we made Unsolved for NBC Universal in 2018, we filmed the Gaines shooting at this same gas station where it really happened, even though it had been remodeled since 1997. Still, that recreation in Unsolved is about as faithful of a recreation as you'll ever see of this incident. Detective Russell Poole and his senior partner, Detective Miller, are assigned to the case. When they ask about security cameras at the AM/PM, the clerk tells them no camera shows exterior, which is not true. And bizarrely, the fight over this security video will run throughout this entire investigation. Meanwhile, the items recovered from Gaines and his vehicle include a 9mm Smith & Wesson semi-automatic pistol that was found on the floorboard with a loaded magazine. It's also determined that his gun had a live round in the chamber, so it was ready to fire when he was shot. And this gun is registered to Kevin Gaines. There's also a bank envelope with $984 cash, a t-shirt for the Soul Train Music Awards held the night before Biggie was killed, Gaines's LAPD police ID, and a receipt from Monty's Steakhouse for $952. And Monty's was a known Death Row Records hangout, and a $952 dinner bill for a police officer would raise further suspicion in some people's minds of Gaines's extracurricular activities outside of being a cop. Detectives Miller and Poole determined that the SUV Gaines was driving is registered to his girlfriend, and that girlfriend turns out to be Sharitha Knight, who was at that time the estranged wife of Suge Knight. Suge and Sharitha have been separated for approximately 4 years by this point. Conspiracy theorists have claimed that Gaines did security work for Death Row Records, but the reality is that he only worked as a bodyguard at a birthday party for one of Snoop's kids because Sharitha was Snoop's manager at the time. And here's what Death Row Records' former head of security, Reggie Wright Jr., told me when I interviewed him for my murder rap documentary in 2014.
Suge Knight was married to Sharitha Knight. He's not gonna have me, and I'm not gonna do that to him. Have somebody working around and working for us that's friends or that's fucking his wife. We don't get down like that.
That evening, Miller and Poole interview Sharitha and her mother at Sharitha's house. They state that Gaines had left to run errands at the time of the shooting, going to the gym and picking up car tires. And those tires are in the back of Gaines's vehicle when he's shot. Miller and Poole then return to the crime scene and tell the clerk to save the security videotape and that they'll pick it up the next day. But the clerk tells them the owner of the AMPM has now told him not to release the security video to anyone. At 10 p.m., the detectives quit the crime scene and interview Frank Liga at the LAPD's North Hollywood station 40 minutes later. The following day, Poole talks to a detective who claims he'd had a highway dispute nearly identical to the Gaines-Liga situation, where a man in a Montero had motioned for him to pull over and then got out of his car. And just like Liga, this detective has his own gun ready, but decides to leave the area instead. He later saw the same vehicle in the Pacific Station parking lot, which is where Gaines was assigned. 2 days after the shooting, Miller and Poole finally get the security camera footage of the crime scene from the AMPM. That same afternoon, a witness who works across the street from the AMPM claims that 5 to 6 men entered her business and aggressively attempted to get information from her on the shooting. And one of them identified himself as an LAPD officer. She says she was intimidated by the individuals. They were belligerent and tried to put words in her mouth. So now it seems like associates of Kevin Gaines may be tampering with witnesses, and some of them might even be police officers. The following day, detectives view the AMPM security video at Arco's security office. Poole reports that the video shows Liga and Gaines's vehicles, that you can hear 2 shots, and then Gaines's vehicle pulls into the AMPM and additional narcotics detectives and patrol officers arrive and secure the scene. So according to Poole, the video shows what Liga and other witnesses said happened. Unfortunately, these are the only 2 stills that I have from that security video, and apparently they show Liga's car on the street in front of the station, but I don't think you can really see anything in this poor copy. Detectives also consider charging the LAPD officer who was allegedly intimidating the business across the street with interfering with an investigation or attempt to dissuade a witness. That afternoon, detectives get a call from the AMPM owner requesting they return the security video because Johnny Cochran's investigators are asking for it. I don't know who owns the AMPM now, but back in 1997, the owner eventually had an attorney file a formal demand for the videotape to be returned to him. And then on March 24th, 6 days after the Gaines shooting, the detectives are officially notified that Johnny Cochran's law office has been retained by Kevin Gaines's family. And one of Cochran's attorneys asked them to turn over Gaines's clothing for analysis. And Poole tells them, hey, it's an active investigation and we're not turning over anything. That day, detectives also find out that a Poquito Mas restaurant across the street, which is still there today, had a security camera that may have also caught the shooting. But unfortunately, only the manager had a key to access the footage, and they were out of town for 3 days, and by now the footage has been taped over. That manager also says that a private investigator came by asking questions about the incident. So it's pretty remarkable for these detectives that they have all these extra people basically climbing around their crime scene and the surrounding area, canvassing it, running their own private investigations, possibly trying to intimidate witnesses. Just shows the amount of attention that this case was getting. And as the shooting gets press coverage and Gaines's photo runs in the newspapers, more citizens call in with claims of past road rage incidents with Gaines. A volunteer at the Hollywood Community Center claims that 4 to 6 weeks prior, he'd been run off the road by a man driving a Mitsubishi Montero near the location where Gaines was ultimately shot by Liga. He claims he then pulled up next to the Montero and the driver said, "Do you have a problem? We can settle this quick. I have this and this," and then brandished a handgun and an LAPD badge. This witness is 99% sure the driver was Gaines. An LAPD detective who isn't involved in the case also claims that they may have had a road rage incident with Gaines 6 months ago, where Gaines had threatened to cap some rounds at him. So if all these claims about these other road rage incidents are true, it's kind of wild that Gaines was basically just driving around raging at people and flashing his gun at anyone that pissed him off or that he felt like cut him off in traffic or whatever. And I don't know, it seems like eventually he just did that to the wrong person. There's one more story involving Gaines that is so wild,
I almost can't believe it's true. And it comes from an FBI report that I know has a number of inaccurate claims, so I take this story with a grain of salt. But it claims that in August of 1996, Gaines makes an anonymous 911 call from a gas station and reports an assault with a deadly weapon and gives a description of the victim that matches himself, and then goes home and confronts the police officers who arrive, and essentially he tries to start a confrontation with them, and after he's handcuffed, he finally tells them who he is, and later on he files a lawsuit against the LAPD. In an insane coincidence, the gas station where he made the 911 call that started all of that was the same one where he would be killed 7 months later.
A year after Gaines is shot, Poole enters a note in the case chrono stating that the deputy district attorney has reviewed the case and determined that the shooting of Kevin Gaines was a lawful act committed in self-defense. The DA's office will not take any further action in this case. Case closed, cleared other. So, no charges. And that should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Johnny Cochran's law firm files a $25 million lawsuit against the city of Los Angeles on behalf of Gaines's estate. And in May of 1999,
2 years after the shooting,
the city settles for $250,000. And even though this is just 1% of what the lawsuit was asking for, Detective Frank Liga is reportedly infuriated, likely because even though he was cleared of any wrongdoing by the deputy district attorney and by multiple internal affairs investigations, the mere fact that the city settled for any amount could make him look guilty in the eyes of some people. And in my opinion, I suspect that this is why some people are still pushing Russell Poole's theory about the Biggie murder. I suspect that they're hoping that the $500 million civil case against the city of Los Angeles for Biggie's murder will get refiled. And that this time around, the city will offer a modest settlement just like they did with Gaines, just to finally make it go away. And then the folks pushing Poole's theory can claim some form of vindication.